I think it's very surprising that an agreement that issued by a tax authority that the government, the taxpayer, and the financial auditor thought was valid is suddenly being second guessed 10 years after the fact or many years after the fact is very troubling. There's no tax certainty if the EC can second guess and apply principles that are not abundantly clear for purposes of determining the validity of that agreement. It's very troubling, and it makes it difficult for companies to function and to understand what their cost is going to be. Certainly unilateral APAs seem to be in the crosshairs of the EC. I guess the question is a bilateral APA, and I think of a bilateral APA between two high tax countries shouldn't be at risk because the question is really deciding how to eliminate double taxation. So I would imagine that bilateral APAs or multilateral APAs should not be under the scrutiny of the EC, but then once again, I couldn't even predict that the EC would go after the types of rulings that are at issue in Apple and other taxpayers' cases. Certainly the EC is communicating that we should just trust them, that their case selection is pure. I think it's really unclear how they're selecting their cases, certainly not clear to me. The companies, the big profile companies are primarily US companies. I understand that the EC will cherry pick statistics to indicate that there are other taxpayers at issue besides US taxpayers, but certainly it seems like the companies that are in the news are primarily US companies. And so it feels like US companies aren't being discriminated against.
Was that because US companies aren't paying their taxes?
No, it's because US companies are under scrutiny, and I think it's unclear, once again, how the EC selected these cases, but it certainly is very US heavy. I find it very troubling. We have very certain rules on permanent establishment, transfer pricing, and if those have been followed, then other countries don't have a stake in that income. So I do find it troubling that it seems like using Apple as a piñata to hit it repeatedly to shake it for cash. I do find that very troubling. So if there are reasons or rationales for applying tax laws, obviously countries can make those claims, but otherwise I find it's like a political maneuver forcing other countries to attack multinational companies. I am very concerned that regardless of where the multinational is located, that it does create a precedent for ignoring the rule of law and looking for other ways for increasing the tax take of a jurisdiction. I think it's very troubling, and it creates significant instability for businesses. It also will create multiple levels of taxation for companies. I think companies have to consider or factor in, as part of tax planning, risk that their planning will be discovered and will be described in the worst light by the press. We've seen leading up to investigations in the U.S. Senate, for example, there were several articles in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and other publications that described tax planning and rightly or wrongly characterized in a very negative light. And companies will have to factor that into their planning. Are they willing to accept the risk that their planning is on the front page of the journal?